today's video, we're going to explore the Type tool in Adobe Photoshop. We're going to go through things such as adjusting spacing, shapes, colors, all of the little bits and pieces you want to take full control of your text when creating designs or images in Photoshop, and even a few quick and nifty effects. So I've got this document open here, and it's pretty straightforward. The first thing you're going to want is there's a Type tool down here in your toolbar on the left. If I hold that down, we got horizontal, vertical, vertical type mask and horizontal type mask. One thing I want to touch on very quickly is if I type in the horizontal tool, I'll make that left aligned. Horizontal, obviously it types horizontally. But if I choose the vertical tool, it types vertically. So you can see what they mean by horizontal and vertical pretty easily. One types horizontally, one types vertically. Pretty straightforward. But what you're probably wondering is the mask tool. To show you the difference of what the mask tool is, I don't really think it's necessary to even use. If I type in the horizontal mask tool here and type, I get this red background, which is where we edit masks for selections. So I'm going to type in mask here and hit the tick symbol. You can see that my text is actually not an object, it is a mask. So I can actually move this around as a selection and even sort of delete, do things like that. It just creates a selection you can use in Photoshop, which I think is kind of useless, to be honest, because we can create a mask using the other one with a bit more safety and control. So when we go back to the normal horizontal type tool and I type in something such as information, we've got our text right here. Now if I want to resize this text, I can go up here to the size, but I can also just simply go to transform, such as free transform, and enlarge this. I can hold down shift to get a different proportion. You might find that you have the inverted settings. If you have this link symbol clicked, you can untick it, and then it'll have the opposite effect where holding down shift will maintain proportion. So that's sort of how you can also just free transform this as you want. A quick way to do that is hit Control T or Command T when you have the layer selected and move that around as you see fit. You can also rotate it. And if you hold down Control, you can skew it. Control Command, you can also skew the text and get some funny shapes that way too. Just going to hit Escape to return that to what it was. Keep in mind you can use a lot of these transform tools, but you will find some limitations as because it's not a rastered image, it's what's known as a vector image. You can't actually do as many sort of transformations to it because it's actually a series of shapes and calculations and not just like a series of pixels like a photograph. Now to demonstrate what I mean by that, if I take this here and I resize it and make it really large, you'll notice now no matter how big it gets, it doesn't pixelate. Whereas if you zoom in on a photo or enlarge a photo, you get a blurriness or a pixel to the edge. This means you can have this at any size and maintain a clean, crisp quality to it. So I'm going to hit Escape again. Now with the text tool, if you've ever used anything like Microsoft Word or anything like that, when you actually click this text tool, like I said, when you type, you do get a layer over here. If you can't see your layers palette, head to Windows and down to Layers. So you do get a layer here you can move around and reshuffle. So if you have multiple layers and images, you can move that in front or behind of objects quite easily. If you want to know more about layers, leave a comment below and I'll do a dedicated video on it. But what we can do from here, we've got our standard tools along here. I can actually transform this from a horizontal to a vertical by clicking that button. I'll see Control Z, undo. But I can toggle between the two pretty easily. And of course, I can choose my fonts here. I can even go, say, type in Times, and it will filter down any fonts that have has the word Times in it. So I can choose Times New Roman, or something like that if I want to. Or I can choose a completely different font, such as Poppins. And you can see I've got a few different weights here, but I'm going to choose just semi-bold. And because I have the Type tool clicked here, all I have to do to change anything on here globally is go through, change the thickness, or I can change the size by either dragging this around or choosing a size from the drop down, or even typing in, say, 100 point, so PT, to get what I want. I can even change the unit of measurement. I can make it 50 centimeters, which is huge. That's why it's not showing up. So I'll try 50 millimeters, and it will actually convert that to points, which is 141 points. And of course I can change this area here, which is called anti-aliasing. Now the way that works is if I just get this here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit up towards here. Now if you want to know how to click in and out of zoom, I hit the Z button on my keyboard, or you can use the hourglass down there. I'm going to zoom in, and this circle here, you'll notice, has sort of some steps. It's not a solid yellow all the way around. It goes to semi-transparent. Now the reason it does that is because it creates a smoother looking object when zoomed out. Because even though this is a vector object, it's being made within a what's called a bitmap image, which is a series of pixels or dots. It's essentially all these grid lines represents one color, and it's a map of bits or a map of pixels. It's called a bitmap. But if I take the anti-aliasing off this, so I click the tool here and I change this to none, you'll notice it gets very rough. So now when I zoom in, we've got this rough edge. There's no semi-transparent sections there, and it creates a very rough looking text. So when we have the type tool, we want to have anti-aliasing turned on. Strong, or any of these will get a similar effect. Slightly different, but a little bit hard to demonstrate in the video. But you'll see it gets a nice smooth effect, so you do want to make sure you have your anti-aliasing turned on. However, you may want that pixelated effect, so you can consider turning it off if you want to as well. Alright, so we're back to our text. I've got my text layer selected, and like any other text format program, we can center it, left align it. I'm actually going to add another line, so we've got middle and last. As you can see, this is currently left aligned. I can change it to center to make it center aligned, or right aligned to make it right aligned, back to left aligned. You get the idea. I'll leave those there actually. Now, also, like anything else, we don't just change everything globally. I can also select a line in the middle here. I can make this a different color. I can also make it a different thickness. I can edit text directly, just like you would in any other program. I can make this M a green color. So you can grab anything on there to, further, edit exact text like you would any other word editing program. So it changes back to white globally. Now we're starting to get to a little bit more of the interesting parts here. These two boxes here are interesting. We've also got a 3D text tool. If I click on that, you can click and work in the 3D space, so you can create some 3D text. A little bit beyond what we're trying to touch on with this video. We're trying to touch on typography, the basic typography, not creating 3D text, so we're going to leave that for now. So we've got our text here, and we've also got these options here. These are like warping text. So we've got some different styles. We can arc the text, and a bit of a performance issue at the moment, which happens sometimes when recording videos. So we've got our text tool. If we go to our warp options up here again, once again we can choose arc. I'm just going to cancel for a second. I'm going to put this on one line so we can see more clearly. It's still on. Still got two lines technically. All right, go to our warp, and you see we have arc. I just want to bring that bend down a bit. So sometimes you can get some nifty effects when it's a little more subtle. You can also do it vertically, which looks a bit funny. And you've got all these different other things. You can arc the lower portion of it, so this top stays straight, the bottom doesn't. Arch, which is sort of a different type. It's a little bit different than the arc itself. And you just got these different little effects you can play with to get varying sort of styles in your text. So you can have a look at those and get some pretty nifty effects if that's what you're looking for. And that's a nifty little sort of panel to play with. But where you get most of your most powerful text tools for anyone who's interested in sort of typography, if that makes sense, is this character section here. I click on this toggle, the character and panels. We get this character panel, which also shows up here under window and character. So you've got here, you've also got the paragraph panel as well, which is pretty straightforward. You can indent. So, if you have a second line again, maybe I want to indent that by 10 or even 50. So I can have a line indent here if I want to, right align that line. So you can actually set different alignment to different lines within that text box if you want to. Just going to Control Z out of that. But most of what we're looking for is in this character box. We've got our basic sizing, which we looked at before, which was up the top here. Size. We've also got sort of kerning or letter spacing. We have optical or metrics. So if I take this here, over on the right we've got some line heights and letter heights. I'm going to add that second line in again. And you'll see here, if I choose the line height here where it says auto, I can make it 8. And because the text size is 116 points and the line height is 8, that means the next line is 8 point down. So if I type in 116, it's the exact height of the font toward the next line. But I can also bring it closer, so 48, or maybe I choose something like 80 to get tighter sort of line heights, or even 90. Or if I want to really spread the line height out, I can make it 160. So you can see here the difference in the text size and the line height will actually change across the board. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this, if I hit transform, free transform, or Control T, I can resize this and it will maintain a proportional space. However, if I go up here to the text size and make it 18, it maintains the line height between those lines. So you do want to remember that when you start playing with the line height, that you may want to use transform if you want to maintain that proportionate line height sort of between lines. So we've got this right now, and we've also got VA here, which is the difference between letter spacing. I can have it at negative 100 and they can be really tight, or I can set it to 200 and have them really far apart. You can also type in numbers like 5, like a 50, even 500. So you can actually create letter, so that the width between the letters you can really customize. Negative 25 keeps things nice and tight without being too tight. Different fonts may have different effects. 50, a little bit too tight. So if we've got negative 25, we have a nice width between letters. And I'm going to make this 120, so we get a nice tight looking bit of text. Now the other thing is, where we have this here, I mentioned before about metrics, it simply adds in a percentage or a certain width between each letter, which is a purely just a measurement. If we change that to optical, it tries to actually determine what the optimal space is based on the shape of the letter. So we get a more optical spacing, and in many ways looks more consistent most of the time. Now, if you were actually designing a logo or something, which I wouldn't recommend doing in Photoshop if you're a professional, use something like Illustrator, you would kern the letters and move each individual letter until you were happy with the spacing from letter to letter. But that's only for logos. You probably wouldn't want to do that for a body of text. You've got a few other options here. If I make this option here 200%, you'll notice it stretches the font to 200% of its height. So if I want to make the font slightly taller or slightly shorter, I can change the percentage of height and change the proportion of the text here, which is pretty handy. And the same with the width, 150. I can make it a certain width. Control Z to undo. So that's a handy way of playing proportion without having to just use a transform tool or something, because maybe you want to make one particular letter really wide. So the O ends up being really wide, and you can get an effect like that. The other thing too is we've got a few more other options here. So I make this, say, 20. We can play with that setting a bit and move sort of where the line starts. I don't use this option too much, but it is called baseline shift, and the idea is that you move the baseline of the text, which is why it moved up and down. However, maybe I want to move this word line up or down, so I can take that baseline shift, or just reset the whole thing back to 0. But if I move this one up by 10, just that one bit of text moves up, or negative 20, it moves down. So the baseline with the letters is moved up and down using that setting. And of course we've got the color here, the anti-aliasing down the bottom, and we've also got a few other settings. So if I highlight the word second here, I can make it italicize it, and this is not using the official font italics. This is actually being transformed by Photoshop. I can bold it up even further. So if I take this whole line here, I'm just going to type in info. It's still got the wide. I'm just going to type that in like that. I've got it at black, which is the thickest version of that font. I can use this to bolden it up even more. So Photoshop actually adds these in itself. It doesn't actually use the font. I can also, like I said, italicize, or this will actually make everything uppercase, or we can have a variation where the first letter is uppercase and the second lowercase letters are just a lower version of uppercase. So if I type in information and then a capital G and then a capital H, we get this effect, in case that's an effect you want, or you can turn that back off and get the font looking like this. Put that on 2 lines. So you can see how you can adjust these fonts, and you can also add in and raise things up. So if you had, say, information to the power of 3, you can highlight the 3, it'll move it down, it'll move it up, and you can have that little indent there pretty easily. And of course, basics such as underline will strike through. So that's pretty much the character panel and how you can adjust different varying areas of the text. Now, we're going to move on to a little bit more now, which is because we have this as an object in our layers panel. First thing I'm going to do is turn these off. Is if I right click and go to blending options, or even better, just double click in a blank part of the layer there. I'm actually just going to cancel for a sec. I'm going to move this up. It's going to have information there at the top. Double click so we can see exactly what we're doing above the panel. You can still have all your layer blending options here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there might be certain things you want to do with your text, such as give it like a bevel effect so you can actually increase the size. So you can have an outer bevel or an inner bevel, so you get this nice 3D effect. You can add in your drop shadow, so we go down here to drop shadow, and you can get some effects like that. But also maybe you simply want to use a gradient, because the text tool only allows flat colors. We can go down here to a gradient overlay, choose a gradient, something a bit brighter so we can see it, and you can get a gradient effect like that as well. And then you can do things like adding in an inner glow if you want to soften up the edges a little bit. Turn that up. And you can even change the opacity or the layer blend to get a cool effect that way. So you can get some pretty nifty effects by using the layer blending on your text. So I do recommend going through, you can add in some pattern overlays. So if I add in something like this, it does sit under the gradient though, so I want to actually get that gradient, make the opacity a little less to show it, or I can change the blend mode to something else, such as maybe overlay, to bring out the pattern underneath it. Whatever order things are here on the left will show up. It's basically, that's the top, the pattern shows up underneath that, and if I want to move things around, sometimes you can move things around, so I can pick this pattern up. Sometimes I can use the arrow to move things up and down, but in this instance we can't right now. But you can actually play with those settings there as well. Play with your layer blending to get other effects. Another thing you do is add a stroke, which is an outline. So if I want to add a bright yellow outline, I can do that. I can also move this one down and on top add a thin black. So you can add multiple strokes in there if you want to do that. So we've got a black one here. We'll actually move that up. Click on this one here. I've actually edited the yellow one accidentally. So at the moment this stroke is actually on the inside, so I want it to be on the outside like this. So you can get some pretty nifty effects using layer blends for your text. So once you're done with that, hit OK, and then you have a layer you can move around. You can then edit. Guess where I got that reference from, and you can do what you want with it. Add it over the background of your images, make them transparent over here, or even, if you've got like an image in the background, I'll quickly import one. So I've just quickly imported this flame in the background here and move the text above it. I can either have it sitting there like that, and also I can remove all the effects and go straight back to the plain text, but I can then adjust the layer blend to color dodge, things like that. So now we're starting to get a little bit more into the standard areas of Photoshop. But you can see the power that you have with this tool just to do some basic text work. You You can change the typography. You can actually add a few little basic effects with the layer blends. So yeah, I hope you found that all very useful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. If there's anything else you'd like me to cover in Photoshop, also leave a comment below. Otherwise, if you like the video, give it a like, subscribe if you want more, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.